Begin with the blessing that we make before we learn Torah. Baruch atah
Ator,
Adonai
Adonai,
Eloheinu
Eloheinu,
melech
Melech
haolam asher
Hashem,
kishanu
Kishanu,
b'mitzvotav
Tzivanu,
v'tzivanu
Lanu,
al
Al,
rei
Rei,
Torah.
Torah.
Okay, I think we have a few more stories about the Zimun, and then we're going to be on to the next topic. This part we've said already. No. Okay, Rava said that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara recounts, what did Rabbi Akiva say again? Rabbi Akiva said, Rabbi Akiva said that there are no distinctions based on the side of the crowd. Everyone says the same thing. So if you have 3 people, if you have 4 people, if you have 100,000 people, the wording of the Zimun invitation for grace after meals will remain the same. The Gemara recounts that Ravina and Rav Chama bar Buzi happened to come to a banquet at the house of the exilarch. At the end of the meal, Rav Chama rose and was looking to gather a group of 100 participants in the meal so that the Zimun for 100 could be recited. So he's looking, there's a throngs of people here at this White House party, and he's looking to gather 100 people so he could make the special Zimun that is said with 100 people. Ravina said to him, "You need not do so. There's no point, because Rava declared the following. The halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, and the formula remains the same regardless of the number of people participating in the zimun, so long as there are at least 10. So once you have 10,
I thought the zimun is for 3.
zimun starts with 3. So I think that what Rabbi Akiva, I think that that's a good point that you're bringing up. It seems that Rabbi Akiva would agree that between 3 and 10 there is a difference, where in 3 you would say, "Let us bless from whom we have eaten," and by 10 you would say, "Let us bless the Lord that we have eaten from him." But once you get to 10 and you're having Hashem's name in there, at that point, from 10 to 100,000, it would all be the same formula. So from 3 you make the zimun, from 10 you add Hashem's name in there, and by 100 and 1,000 you don't change anything more than that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Awesome. So he said, why are you looking for 100 people? Get 10 and you have the same effect. The Gemara now discusses Rava's conduct at meals in the house of the exilarch. Because we spoke about Rava being at the exilarch's house, we're now going to talk about other stories that happened there. Rava said, when we would eat bread at the house of the exilarch, we would recite the grace after meals blessing in groups of 3. The Gemara asks, let them recite blessings in groups of 10. Why are you making in blessings in group of 3 without Hashem's name? You should do it in groups of 10 with Hashem's name. The Gemara answers, because if they were gathering groups of 10, then the exilarch would hear and become angry if he would see a large group of sages reciting grace after meals before he completed his meal. If you have 3 guys sitting next to each other and they make the grace after meals, you can't necessarily tell that they finished and they did the blessings before you were done. But if you're gathering groups of 10, that's already, an offense to his authority. The Gemara asks, if that's the case, in the house of the exilarch, why did they even need to make their own blessing? Why can't they just wait for the exilarch to make his grace after meals, and they can all be exempted of their obligation through his? The Gemara answers, since everyone is making noise, they do not hear and would not fulfill their obligation. In a huge party like that, everyone's talking and there's a lot of noise. Nobody can hear. the grace after meals from the exilarch. Therefore, everyone has to make their own blessing. Rabba Toisafah said, if you have three people who break bread together, and one of them went ahead and recited grace after meals on his own without a zimun. So one guy went and said the after blessing before the other two guys were ready, and he forgot that he's supposed to make this invitation. The other two diners can fulfill their obligation with his participation in their zimun, meaning the three of them are still sitting there. So the two who have not yet made the grace after meals can sit down and they can say the grace after meals, and he responds with them. And since he has eaten together with them, he can answer their zimun invitation, and they have fulfilled their obligation to do the invitation. He, however, has not fulfilled his obligation because it's already too late. He already made the grace after meals, and he can't have a retroactive zimun. So since he already recited his blessing, his participation in the zimun accomplishes nothing for him. So he has to stay there so the others can fulfill their obligation, but his obligation cannot be fulfilled. He's missed it, and there's nothing he can do. Back to the Mishnah. Now we're talking about Baruch Hu. I think I've already mentioned this joke, but I'm going to say it again. And if you understand it, if you've been to enough bar mitzvahs and enough shuls, then you know that the way it goes is that the one who's getting the aliyah says, Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach, and then the congregation responds, Baruch Hashem hamvorach lo'olam va'ed. And then the one who's getting the aliyah responds after them the same thing that they just said, Baruch Hashem Vorach Lolam Va'ed, and then goes on to the next blessing. So there's a story of a guy who was invited to his nephew's bar mitzvah, and he was told that he's going to get an aliyah at the bar mitzvah. So for months he's practicing to make sure that he gets all the words right and that he knows how to make the blessings. I guess in that synagogue they didn't have the beautiful transliteration paper that we have by us. And he gets up there and he gets up on the bima and he says, Baruch Hu es Hashem hamvorach, and everyone says together, Baruch Hashem hamvorach lo'olam va'ed. And he turns around and he says, shut up, you think I don't know it? Anyways, our Mishnah said that the verbiage for Baruch Hu es Hashem hamvorach. The Mishnah stated that Rabbi Akiva holds that when you're in the synagogue, you should say the Chazan or the one who's getting the aliyah says Baruch Hu es Hashem, while Rabbi Yishmael says that he recites Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach. Baruch Hu es Hashem means bless the Lord. Baruch Hu es Hashem hamavorach means bless the Lord, the blessed one, that God is the blessed one. Rafram Bar Papa happened to come to the synagogue of Abi Gibber when he rose to read from the Torah scroll and recited, bless the Lord. And he was silent. He did not say the blessed one. He said Baruch Hu es Hashem, but he did not say Hamvorach. Because Rafram Bar Papa followed the principle that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva said that you're supposed to just say Baruch Hu es Hashem and skip the word Hamvorach. But the people who were present in the shul were not accustomed to that ruling. And everyone in the synagogue corrected him and said, Baruch Hashem Hamvorach, because they thought he didn't know it, not like the guy in our story. Rava Rava said to Rafram bar Papa, who was the one who was saying this, and the one who skipped the word Hamvorach. Rava said to him, "You black pot." A black pot is a fond nickname for a Torah scholar who invests great effort in Torah study and worship of God.
Why do they call them that?
I'm trying to figure that out myself, and I don't know the answer.
Doesn't sound very fun.
Sorry?
Doesn't sound very fun.
It doesn't. I'm wondering if perhaps it means it's similar to what makes a pot black is if it's constantly simmering and constantly over the fire, then the outside of it gets scorched. So perhaps he was calling him a black pot, that you're a pot that's always on the fire. You're always sitting and learning and studying Torah and worshiping God. That's just a theory. I don't know the answer. He says, "What a great guy you are. Why are you getting involved in this dispute? Who asked you?" Although Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael disagree, Rabbi Yishmael's formula, in which Rabbi Akiva's formula is included, is acceptable to both. Even Rabbi Akiva would not be upset if you added the word Hamvorach. But Rabbi Yishmael would be very upset if you skipped the word Hamvorach. So first of all, you should say what Rabbi Yishmael said, because everybody will be happy with that. And furthermore, standard practice is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. Go look in any synagogue and you'll see that everyone says, Baruch Hu es Hashem Hamvorach. They don't skip Hamvorach. So what are you doing and why are you doing that? And that's the end of the story. L'chaim. Says the Mishnah, if you have three people who ate as one, we learned this already, so we'll go through it fast. I think that we quoted this before. If you have three people who ate as one, they are not permitted to divide and recite grace after meals individually. Rather, they have to recite the zimun together. The same is true of 4 and the same of 5. However, a group of 6, they do not have to all say the blessing together. They can split into groups of 3. A group of 6 up to, but not including 10 people who ate together, may divide into groups, each reciting its own zimun. And if you have 9, then you could have 3 groups of 3. But a group of 10 may not divide into 2 groups until there are 20 people present, because if you have 10 people, what word do you add? Who can tell us? What word do you add if there are 10 people at a zimun? What's the difference between a zimun of 3 and a zimun of 10?
I remember that each one was different. Each one added another word as you went up the numbers, but I don't remember what the actual words were.
Okay, that's fine. Once we have 10, we add Hashem's name. So instead of being blessed is the one from who we ate, you would say blessed is the Lord, the one from whom we ate. So once you have 10 people, you could say Hashem's name. And if the 10 people split into 2, then they miss out on saying Hashem's name. Therefore, they cannot divide into 2 groups unless there are 20 people. So the general principle is that a group may not divide unless the smaller groups will be able to recite the same zimun formula that the entire group would have recited. So if you have 20 people, then you can have 2 groups of 10, each one saying Hashem's name as well. Now, what happens if you have different people in different areas? The Mishnah states a halacha with regard to 2 groups joining together. If there are 2 groups in the same house, when some of the members of each group can see each other, they may combine to form a zimun. Let's say, for example, we were having a big event here in the Chabad house, and you had some people in the main room and some people in one of the side rooms. So long as the people can see each other, then you can have the zimun. However, if let's say you would have the two back rooms, and so nobody can see each other because the rooms are adjacent to each other, then they could not join together to form a zimun. So if some members of each group can see each other, they may combine to form a zimun. And if not, these recite a zimun for themselves, and those recite a zimun for themselves. The Mishnah also speaks of the blessing over wine. One does not recite a blessing over wine until he adds water to it. That is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer. Undiluted wine is too strong to drink, and a blessing is inappropriate, just like we learned many months ago about various medicines and things that are harmful to eat that do not require a blessing. However, the rabbis say that even though it's too strong to drink, but you could drink undiluted wine, one recites a blessing over it. Again, for historical context, in those days, their wine was very, very strong, and the common practice was to have this strong wine, and they would dilute it in their own cups. And that seems to have been what everyone did back then. Says the Gemara. At the beginning of our Mishnah, we learned that if there are three people who ate together, they may not disperse. The Gemara asks, what does this Mishnah teach us? We already learned this once. Three people who ate together are required to form a zimun. So what are we learning here by saying that three people who ate together may not disperse? The Gemara answers, this teaches us that halacha, which Rabbi Abba said in the name of Shmuel. Three individuals who sat to eat as one, and they have not yet begun to eat. Nevertheless, they are not permitted to divide and recite grace after meals individually. So the difference is that in our Mishnah, it's talking about people who are sitting down to eat, even if they haven't ate yet. In the other place, it was about people who have already eaten. So our Mishnah is adding that even though you have not yet started eating, you cannot split up. The Gemara cites another version of the answer. Rabbi Abba said in the name of Shmuel that this is what the Mishnah teaches. Three individuals who sat to eat as one, even though they're not sharing from the same meal, but it's like three co-workers and each and every one is eating from their own bread, they are considered a single group in terms of zimun and are not permitted to divide. Alternatively, perhaps the Mishnah comes to teach that halacha of Rav Huna. As Rav Huna said, three individuals who came from three different groups and sat together to continue their meals also form a zimun and are not permitted to divide. So if you have three people who are from three different groups, but they're in the same house, and then they continue eating together, even though they didn't start their meal together, but because they continued their meal together, they now are not able to split and divide until they make the zimun. Rav Chisda said that is only the halacha in a case where the three individuals came from three groups and each group had three people, so that the original group was independently obligated to recite the zimun and their obligation never lapsed. However, it would seem that if they were coming from groups of less than three, then perhaps because they didn't start their meal together, they wouldn't have to say the zimun, but I'm not sure. Rava qualifies this and says 50b. We only said this halacha in a case where those members of the previous group did not include them in the zimun of their original place. But in a case where they included them in a zimun in their original place, their obligation to participate in a zimun has left them. Okay, this is a great example in a ballroom, let's say. Have you ever been to a big event where there was a big meal in a ballroom?
Yeah.
And then when they start cleaning up, but not necessarily everyone's finished, those people who are still waiting to who are still finishing up can take their food out into the lobby, right? Yeah?
I don't know any of
Let's
that.
assume, right? Let's go with that. So let's say you have a huge ballroom where people are all over the place and everyone's making their own zimun. So you have three tables that, for whatever reason, cannot see each other. So they don't have to join, or maybe you have only 9 people. 9 people in this huge ballroom. And now 2 people from each table have finished eating. The third one from each table has not finished eating, so they go outside to the lobby to finish their meal. We all with us so far?
Mm-hmm.
To these 3 guys who came out to the lobby and sat down next to each other in the corner finishing their meal, do they have to make a zimun? So it depends. If the group that they came from made a zimun because they were done eating, then this person has already exempted his obligation for a zimun, and now he does not have to make a new zimun. However, if they didn't, then these 3 people who joined together would have to make a zimun. So what's the principle contained in this halachic ruling? This is going to get a little complicated, but not too complicated. And the point that we're discussing here is whether we said that the obligation to make a new zimun in your second location or with your second group of friends, I apologize, is dependent on whether you originally were eating with a group of 3 or not. So where do we see that something that was a size of obligation, for example, 3 people are the size of obligation for a zimun, and then they broke up, and then they came back together again, they go back to its original status of obligation. Let's look inside. Rava said, from where do I derive to say this halacha? As we learned in a Mishnah, if you have a bed which was ritually impure, half of it was stolen or lost, or there were 2 brothers and they inherited it from their father and they cut it in half, or there were 2 partners who owned this bed jointly and they cut it in half. So you had a bed, the bed was ritually impure. Now you cut the bed in half or took it apart. So now it's a broken utensil, and broken utensils lose their status as impure and they become now ritually pure. This is true with regard to any ritually impure utensil that was broken or divided. It is no longer a utensil and is therefore ritually pure. However, if you found the thief, or if the brothers decided that one bed is better than a half a bed, and they restored it and reattached the parts, it is now susceptible to ritual impurity from here and on. What does that mean? That it's now susceptible to ritual impurity from here and on. Does it become back to its ritual impure state as soon as they restore it and put it back together?
Well, if they restore it, then it's you could say that it's a different bed, and therefore is no longer have the whatever it is that made it ritually impure. It's like a brand new bed.
That is what it seems to be saying, because it was very clear. It didn't say it goes back to its original state of impurity. It said it can become susceptible to ritual impurity from here on, which means it is pure, but it can become impure. Everyone agree with me?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you, Salman. You got that on the head. Rava infers from here on, yes, it is susceptible to ritual impurity. Retroactively, no, it does not reassume its previous status of ritual impurity. So apparently we see from here that once they divided it, the ritual impurity left it, And although it was restored, it does not reassume its previous state of ritual impurity. So to over here, once he was already included in his zimun, his obligation left him, and he does not reassume his previous obligation because he has already exempted himself from the obligation to do zimun.
Because that opens up a big question.
Go on.
How much restoration does it need in order to be considered a new bed? I mean, like if one leg breaks and they reattach a new leg, does that mean the whole bed is brand new?
That is a very good question. And there's another question. What happens if it's a bed like they have today from IKEA? Right? You know what they say, the CEO of IKEA became the Prime Minister of Sweden. They said the first thing he was going to do is assemble his cabinet.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so if you have an IKEA bed, and let's say you're moving houses, right? Zaman, you just moved houses, right? They took the bed apart and they put it back together. Had the bed been ritually impure before they took it apart, and then they took it apart and put it back together, it's all the same pieces as
Actually,
opposed
that's
to
exactly
ritual
what
impurity.
happened.
Well,
That's exactly what happened. My bed come. I have a platform bed with a big headboard, and it all comes, and they all the pieces come apart, and then they reassemble them. That's
right.
exactly what I have.
So if it would have been ritually impure beforehand, would taking it apart and putting it back together work to make it ritually pure, or would it have to go to a mikvah and you would have to change some of the pieces, or some of the pieces had to have broken in order for that to work? Um, so your question of how much needs to break is a very good question, and there is in fact an entire tractate dedicated to these laws. We will touch on it also in the coming tractate, which is the tractate all about the laws of Shabbat. We're going to touch on it here and there in that as well, if I'm not mistaken, but these are good questions. I'll also put a plug over here for anyone who has time. In about a month, we're going to finish the cycle and then we'll start again. The Lubavitcher Rebbe strongly encouraged the study of Maimonides. There are 3 tracks. The 2 most famous ones, I will say, is to do to learn 3 chapters a day and finish once in a little bit less than a year, or to learn 1 chapter a day and to finish it in a little bit less than 3 years. There's a huge momentum with this, and it's a beautiful program. And in 1 month minus 2 days, in 28 days, we're going to finish this cycle. And it's actually a very big celebration because the 1 year and the 3 year cycle are both finishing um, this time around and starting again from the beginning. And what's so beautiful about the study of Maimonides is that he codifies every concept in Jewish law. So while the Code of Jewish Law that we have today, the book called the Code of Jewish Law, only talks about matters which are relevant to today's society. For example, there's nothing about sacrifices, purity and impurity, matters pertaining to the temple, and things like that. Maimonides, though we don't necessarily take final ruling from Maimonides, he had a huge influence on the Code of Jewish Law, but not everything follows exactly as is said there. So we can't, uh, what's the word? Make definitive law based on just reading Maimonides. But in terms of understanding Jewish concepts and Jewish law, it is a huge wealth of information. I may have mentioned this before. Rabbi Josh Gordon is a phenomenal teacher. He speaks nice and slow and explains things very beautifully. I listen to him very often for my study of Maimonides, and he throws in some good jokes here and there as well to keep it interesting and engaging. You can search on Chabad.org. There's a section called Daily Study. You can find it there, or you can just do a Google search for Josh Gordon, and I'm sure it'll come up straight away. And over there, you'll get the rundown on all of these concepts. So for the 1 year cycle that we're doing 3 chapters a day, tomorrow we begin the final book. For the 1 chapter a day, I believe they're already in that final book and getting close to like 28 chapters from finishing. So if you want to start now, is a great time to start. That's
Is
a
that
plug
in
for the
English?
daily study of Maimonides. Sorry.
Is that in English or Hebrew?
His Rabbi Josh Gordon speaks, so he says the Hebrew words and then translates and explains. And if he speaks too slowly, then you can also, what do you call it? Listen on, they have a setting, you can listen it faster. I'm gonna actually post the link into the chat, or you know what? You can all see over here. So on Chabad.org, you can go to Learning and Values, and then you'll hit Daily Study. Under Daily Study, you can find Rambam. Rambam is Maimonides. So you can either hit the 3 chapters or the 1 chapter. So let's look at the 1 chapter for now. And you have a bunch of different people to listen to. I like to listen to Rabbi Gordon. You click on Rabbi Yehoshua B. Gordon. This is him. You can watch it. You can listen to it.
The laws of rebellious ones. We just finished learning the laws of dishonoring parents. Now we segue into the laws of honoring parents. And remember, honor your father and mother, one of the 10 commandments. Serious stuff. Kibud Avoim, honoring one's father and mother, mitzvahs aseh gedolah, is a great positive mitzvah. It's not only a positive mitzvah, it's a jumbo one, a biggie. So also meira, the negative side of it, fear, respect of a father and mother. Shakal eisen akosa b'chvedu v'meiroi. The Torah compares honoring parents with honoring God.
So there you have a small taste of it, and you can see kind of how he speaks, and he explains everything. He does read the Hebrew, but he explains everything beautifully in the English as well. So you can, if you want, here's the 1 chapter a day is a great place to start. I'm gonna go in the chat box here. Where's the chat box? I don't see the chat box anyway. Whoops. Here's the chat box. I'm gonna paste that link here in the chat box. If you want to, you can open that on your computer. And then you'll see that, and then very soon there'll be a big celebration, and then we'll start again. Is anyone here interested in taking this on?
I'd be interested.
Okay. Let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear progress and to hear how you enjoy his classes. Now, I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions. Feel free to ask them. The Mishnah explained circumstances back inside in the Talmud, where we're holding. The Mishnah explained the circumstances in which 2 groups that were eating in one house may combine to form a zimun. The Gemara adds, it was taught if there is a common waiter among them serving both groups, the waiter joins them into a single group, even if they cannot see each other. If there's one buffet or one waiter who's serving both groups, then even if they can't see each other, they can still do a zimun together. In the Mishnah, we learned one does not recite a blessing over wine until he adds water to it. That is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer. And the rabbis say one recites a blessing over it. Regarding this, the sages taught in the Tosefta. Over wine, if he has not yet added water to it, You do not make the blessing over wine, borei peri hagafen. Rather, he would say, borei peri ha'etz, as it is merely fruit juice. It is not considered wine. It's syrup. It's not wine. Moreover, since it is not halachically considered wine, one can wash their hands with it for hamotzi. However, once he added water to it, it is considered wine, and therefore the blessing would be borei peri hagafen, who creates the fruit of the vine. And you cannot use it to wash your hands for hamotzi. That is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer is the one who makes this distinction between whether wine has been diluted or whether it's still in its pure, strong form. The rabbis say in either case, whether water has been added or not, guess what? It's wine. And when you make the blessing of wine, borei peri hagafen, and one may not use it to wash your hands for hamotzi. Okay, what about the next opinion? In accordance with whose opinion is that halacha which Shmuel said? What did Shmuel say? Glad you asked. Shmuel said a person may perform all his needs with bread. What does that mean? That means that he may use it for purposes other than food and need not be concerned that he is treating the food contemptuously. Us, as being descendants of Holocaust survivors, probably have many of us seen that not even a crumb goes to waste, and we treat it with the greatest of dignity and respect. However, Shmuel said that you can use your bread to prop up your book or for anything that you want. You can use it as a sponge to clean up the water. In accordance with whose opinion among the Tanaitic opinions cited above, and the Gemara answers, it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who permits one to wash his hands with undiluted wine. How? Because if you use undiluted wine to wash your hands, what's going to be on your hands?
Wine.
Very good. Wine will be on your hands. And if you take those hands and you hold your bread to make the blessing, what's going to be on the bread?
Wine.
Wine. And if your bread gets full of wine, that ruins it. But Rabbi Eliezer permitted you to wash your hands with undiluted wine, seems to have no issue with ruining your bread.
Why would wine ruin bread? I mean, you can dip bread in wine if you want.
It's a good question. I don't know the answer, but I guess that it's not as enjoyable if it's been soaked in wine. There are laws that we're going to get to later that, where is this?
I mean, you can dunk a donut in coffee.
You can dunk a donut in coffee, that's right. But there are special rules that we're not supposed to pass a glass of wine over the bread, because if the wine spills on the bread, it will ruin the bread. However, over here, Rabbi Eliezer says you can wash your hands with wine and then eat bread without a problem. So it seems that he doesn't worry about those rules and holds that you can use bread for whatever you want, and it doesn't have that sacred untouchability. Rabbi Yosei, the son of Rabbi Hanina, said, the rabbis agree with Rabbi Eliezer that you have to dilute the wine when it comes to a cup of blessing. For example, the cup for Kiddush or the cup over which grace after meals is recited. That you can't recite a blessing over it until you add water to it. What is the reason? Rabbi Oshaya said, we require that a mitzvah be performed in the best possible manner. With regard to the issue of wine itself, the Gemara asks, according to the rabbis, for what is undiluted wine, which is virtually undrinkable, what is it fit for? Rabbi Zera said it is good for koraite, which is a medical drink made from wine and oil. Okay, right here we have the rules. The Gemara continues to discuss the topic of using food. The sages taught 4 things were said with regard to bread. One may not place raw meat on bread, because then the blood will drip on the bread and render it inedible. One may not pass a full cup of wine over bread, lest the wine drip on it and ruin the bread. So a full cup of wine, because it could drip on it. One may not throw bread, and one may not use bread to prop up a dish. The basis for these laws is that we are supposed to treat bread with respect. Bread is the staple of human food. At least it was considered the staple of human food for many millennia, and therefore it is to be treated with respect. The Gemara recounts Amemar, Mar Zutra, and Ravashi were eating bread together, and someone brought dates and pomegranates before them. Mar Zutra took fruit and threw a portion to Ravashi. Ravashi was astounded and said to him, "Does my master not hold with that which was taught in a brisa? You're not allowed to throw food. Didn't your mom never tell you? Didn't your teacher never tell you? Don't throw food?" He responded, "Yeah, but that was about bread, not about other foods." Ravashi challenged him again. "Wasn't it taught in a brisa? Just as one may not throw bread, so too one may not throw other foods?" Mar Zutra said, "One second, I learned it the opposite way in another brisa. Although you may not throw bread, you may throw other food." Huh. So what do we do now? Rather, it is not difficult, as the two brises are addressing two different cases. This brisa that it said that you may not throw other foods talks about a food item, I guess, like a piece of an apple or like a date or a fig that will become disgusting when it's thrown, right? It'll pick up old pieces of stuff on it. Whereas that brisa that says you could throw food talks about a food item that does not become disgusting when thrown. If you throw an orange, well, you're going to peel it anyway. So even if it lands on the floor, it's not a problem. Okay. Thank you all for joining. Tomorrow, please join us at 11 a.m. as we learn about Moses, the holy man Moses, and his journey. What's my fancy, I like the way that this was put. In the footsteps of Moses, from the palace, through the sheepfold, to the question that no one dared to ask. Please join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. as we discuss lessons we can learn from the life of Moses as we begin the second book of the Torah, the book of Exodus. Thank you, Chaim, for joining. Thank you, Zalman, for joining. Thank you, Bela Esther. Wishing you all a wonderful day.